Uh, cool. So, yeah, this is going to be just a little example video, I guess, of both how I'm sort of like setting my own syllabus and testing myself, and there'll be some demonstrations, I think, as well as like uh, some stuff that I'll speak about in terms of like how I actually like, for lack of a better term, like get my homework marked. Um, so one of the things that like, if you're not aware of this, like I think is useful to understand is that learning is difficult and it is proportional to how difficult the process is. So listening to people is normally the easiest part, at least in my experience. It's then solving problems with that new information, for example, that like actually is then more difficult and is where like learning happens better. So like just understanding that generally, hopefully will then like lend a lens to what you'll see in terms of like what I do. I think the extra useful bit of information to understand about me and like my specific point of reference is that um, this is a specific point of reference for me and how my brain works. And I'll let you know now, it does not work the way a lot of other people's brains work, um, in both good and in bad ways. So yeah, like if you want to like just listen to this video and understand like, oh, well, what can I do for myself? The short answer is don't take any of the like methodologies as like golden rules. But hopefully you might be able to see like the pattern through which like I've found methodologies as well as like the general framework that they're applied within, which is that learning is hard, and that means we have to find ways in which doing the hard thing for us isn't difficult. So in terms of then how I like keep track of things, I have here an Obsidian doc that I use. So I've got some basic stuff, like I've got an area with fun problems where I was talking to a colleague yesterday about a problem that they were doing in like coding, and I was just enjoying the mathematical side of it, of like finding an actual proof. And unfortunately, I ended up, I think, finding a proof for this after the fact on paper rather than in here. But like, that's the beauty of like what this is that like I don't have to finish writing all of this down to have benefited from the process of solving the problem. Um, and so this is nice in that if I want to keep a note of it and come back to it, I can, and I might still come back and go through this process again, specifically because doing it more than once might actually net me, a better capacity to do it again later. But this is basically just where I keep notes. So I've written some things about Cantor and Infinity, some like what I think are extended statements you can make, as well as then like a broader idea. I've got then a list of like syllabus stuff that I want to cover in terms of stuff that I already am, stuff that I think might be adjacently relevant. This right now is just a list of like mathematic concepts that I'm covering, but it's like all nestled within a broader context of uh, some of the writing that I was doing, and this is a more broader document that I was writing because I was struggling with like some of what Cantor has said with regards to Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and like maybe all the ideas here are wrong, but like that's, I think, one of the processes that for me is by far the most useful tool that I use, I think, in my learning process is, if you haven't figured it out already, I think by speaking, and so at times writing is really important because just thinking ideas at times doesn't force you to be precise with language, whereas once you've got that language onto a bit of paper, and then you write something else later on with regards to it, you might actually realize that you're using a word in a one way earlier on and another way later on. And when you're thinking that, hey, maybe that's easier to miss when it's written down, maybe it's easier to catch. And that's again like really specific to a person. So uh, this is sort of where I broadly keep things, and then I've got yeah, like a couple of like examples of some ideas, right? Where I have a live script of the thing that prompted me to begin writing in the first place, and it's what, like, yeah, almost 10,000 words long now, and uh, I'm sure if I were to go back and read it, I would find immediate issues with it because of the new things that I've encountered. Since I started writing it, that prompted me to go looking at deeper ideas behind philosophy and maths and physics than when I first started writing it. So, interestingly enough, that's sort of, I think, the beauty of it is of this learning process for me is uh, I like encountering ideas and synthesizing them into what I already know and understand about the world. And I think one of the really important things is that when we're talking about sources, just because some historically really smart, clever guy said somebody, and we as society are sort of culturally reverent to them. So Isaac Newton's a really good example. Um, doesn't mean that their idea like was fundamentally right. Uh, and that's I think a really interesting thing to comprehend. That historically Newton probably didn't have any concept of how transformatively influential his discoveries would be for the world when he was making them. Um, and had he not thought that he was onto something or that he couldn't be onto something because of some person before him, he might not have made them. And that's sort of the approach that I want to make, not with the hopes that I'll be an Isaac Newton. I think specifically that is also a foolish driving factor. Um, the hope that I have is that in everything that I'm writing or everything that I'm saying is that it's logically coherent and tied to other information that other people have already, synthesized, which to me then would make it seem obvious that anything I can possibly say is stuff that somebody else has already said before me. Um, and that's really, I think, conceptually like how all patterns sort of work is at some point somebody proposes a new pattern based on all the old patterns, assuming that it just sort of logically makes sense as a result of all the old patterns, or even looks at all the old patterns and goes, I think some of these are wrong, suggests a new set of patterns that seems to explain all the old ones, but explain some other thing better. But I think, like, importantly, like, this idea of discovery is like um, separated from that process. Uh, at least for me, that's sort of how I approach engaging with ideas and learning. Is that ultimately all I'm trying to do is encounter new ideas, and as I encounter them, try and fit them into the framework of like what I already know and what already makes sense, and go through the process of, do I misunderstand the world and what I know is wrong, and that's why this thing isn't synthesizing, or is what I'm encountering synthetically wrong with what I already know because only part of it's right. And that's been, as an example, my fun encounter with certain representations of Cantor's idea that I've encountered that make me reflexively go, no, this seems wrong, and how it sort of aligns with things like Gödel's incompleteness theorem that I'm still wrapping my head around as well. And I think that's the beauty of learning is like I'm so early days into really understanding all of that uh, it doesn't seem straightforward and trivial every time I'm thinking about it. And so that's why I write things down. And that's also why I'm not in any way like attached to what I write. I think the process of writing is a really good sort of test of how you can synthesize from your understanding of what you've encountered a personal construction of what it is that you are sort of regurgitating. Um, and that's effectively what like homework is in school, I think, and what I really failed to understand when I was in high school or uni. So yeah, that's just very brief explanation of my learning process, and um, importantly as well is this idea that how I write things down only has to sort of matter to me. Um, if I write something down and somebody were to come across it and then say, oh, I think this is wrong, and then I hear how they think it's wrong and I go, oh, let me word it differently, then that's not super important. Um, then the final aspect of all of this is like, how do I test uh, what conclusions I'm making against sort of the like some rubric, for lack of a better term. And so I'm really fortunate and privileged to have, I'd say in particular, like one person in my life that I can really rely on to always critically engage with my ideas, who knows far more about, especially mathematics and logic to, I think, a good extent as well. Maybe not necessarily quite so much philosophy, but beautifully it doesn't have to be for him to be able to engage with what I say. That I get good pushback from him and encouragement. And you know, this is a byproduct of the fact that he's been doing it far longer than I have, and he knows far more than I do. Um, so that's one of the ways. And then another way that I sort of I hope to, I guess, do this is by putting my ideas out there into like the world in various forms, like with these kind of videos, and hopefully with finding communities where these kinds of discussions are possible, where I can, you know, propose the thing that I'm struggling with, where I go, hey, like from this idea and this idea, I would say this thing, not this thing. Can somebody help me understand that? And you know, beautifully, like sometimes people have already had the same issues that I've had in the past, and sometimes they haven't, and that doesn't necessarily mean that my ideas are wrong either. And that's sort of, I guess, the fun process of learning for me. And sort of then hopefully I'll be able to use that to go back and eventually write the thing that I want to write, without, you know, spending 2,500 words and going, oh, I can't write it from this perspective. I need to rewrite it from this other one until I learn more. So yeah. Anyway, there we go. Yes, stop recording.